Actually, Ari, I'd say the reverse, which is that after October, my book came out actually a few months after October the 7th. And one of the chapters is what does it mean to believe in God? And what happens if you're not sure you believe? But you know what? People started coming back to synagogues much more after October the 7th. People wanted to not necessarily pray to God, but to be with other Jews, to identify. So there was definitely a sense of that feeling going on there. And in my book, what I want to discuss is the issue of faith, because modern people have a difficulty with belief in God. They just do. Rationists, they're scientifically trained, they believe in things that are measurable, they don't want to be tricked by things that aren't real, and they're just not sure about God. And a lot of people have that feeling of what does it mean to believe in God? And it's such an important question that I spent 2 chapters on it. One is, what does it mean to believe? And I discussed that. And then a chapter, which I'm actually going to talk a bit about tonight, which is, what if you're not sure you believe? And so I'm going to try, instead of talking about what belief is, I'm going to talk about the Hebrew word emunah. You've all heard the phrase emunah, to have faith. And I want to show you how the Torah uses it, because the way the Torah uses the word is not the way we normally understand it. And if we look at what emunah really is, we'll discover that a lot of us actually do have belief, but maybe not in the way that you imagined. And I'm going to do a big distinction between the Christian view of belief and the Jewish one. And they're very, very different. I'm going to quote an amazing book by Martin Buber, which is literally called Two Types of Faith. It's a hard book, but I've got the major bit to it, and he makes an amazing point in it. So that's the warm up to get you excited. Let's jump in and see how we go. And feel free to make comments in the chat as we go, and I will try and respond. So let me share with you straight away the handout. Ari's also put it in the chat if you prefer to look at it that way around. But here it is. I've called it religion, emunah for atheists, religion for atheists. And I've got a nice picture there actually of a synagogue, but you'll see it's empty. So it's pews for atheists. So here's the thing, as I said, right? Jewish belief is normally understood as, do you believe in God, right? I'm supposed to believe in God. And the Hebrew term for that normally, belief or faith, is emunah. But how is the term used in the Torah? Let's investigate, and it's quite surprising. So the first time that emunah occurs in the Torah is over here, is actually in Genesis. And it's not the first time Abraham meets God. Abraham meets God in chapter 12. God appears and says, go from your land. And Abraham doesn't go, I believed in God. There's no mention of belief. And the first time he meets him, even the second time he meets him, there's no mention at the end of chapter 12. But another time over here, it is. Let's look over here. So we'll look at the verses and you'll see it's something that means slightly different. This is the moment. This is called the covenant between the pieces. Remember that bit? It's at night, the sun sets, and God says to Abraham, go outside and what can you see? Right? And he says to him, fear not, Abraham, I'll be your shield and your reward will be very great. And then Abraham says, Master, what can you give me when I'm going to my end childless? Abraham's worried. He goes, I've got no children. My wife can't have children. And God says, he took him outside and he said, look at the heavens and count the stars. Can you count them? Right? And God said, so will be your seed. Right? So you'll have many kids as the stars in the sky. Right? And the next verse says, V'he'emin b'Hashem v'achshaveha lo l'tzedakah. And Abraham believed in the Lord and he reckoned him for merit, for a good thing. Now, that doesn't mean that, clearly from the context, it doesn't mean Abraham goes, oh, I know God exists. Because he spoke to him in a previous chapter. So it's nothing to do with belief. Here, emunah means, he'emin is another root of it. It's got the basic letters aleph, vav, mem. You know, when we say amen, that's from emunah. So when you say amen, you're saying I agree or I believe. But you're not saying I believe in the existence of a deity called God. What Abraham is doing, Abraham believed what God said to him. He knew God existed, but when God said, you know what, you see the stars in the sky? You're going to have kids like that. It's a promise. And Abraham believed what he said. So God said to Abraham, trust me, right? You're going to have kids. And Abraham trusted God. So that's why I called it emunah, means trust. Not trust that God exists, but that God will deliver. So when you say to someone, believe in me, it means trust in me. Okay? Next, source 2. I'm not going to show you all the sources, but I'm going to show you quite a lot. just to get a feel for this. Okay, this is now the second book in Exodus, and Moses has been appointed by God to lead the Jewish people, and he's really nervous. What does Moses say to God at the burning bush? Moses answered God when God said, "Go and tell the people that I'm going to lead you out, and you're going to be my guide." Moses goes, "But look, they will not believe me. They won't heed my voice, for they'll say, 'The Lord did not appear to you.'" Right? So he says they won't trust me. When I tell them God spoke to me, they won't believe that what I'm saying is true. And the Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" And he said, "It's a staff." And he said, "Okay, fling it on the ground." And he flung it on the ground. It became a snake. Right? So they will believe that the Lord. So the sign of the snake was that they believe in him, do a bit of miracles, and they believe in him. And the Lord said further, "Put your hand in your chest." And it came out as leprous, as you know. And he said, if they don't believe in one, they'll believe in the other. And then what goes on over here in verse 29, Moses and Aaron went and they meet the people, and Aaron spoke all the words that God said, and it says, and the people believed and heeded. Amen ha'am. And the people believed. Now again, they didn't believe Moses existed, but they believed that Moses was speaking on behalf of God. Right? Now it's true he did miracles to do it, but the issue is that Moses wanted to be trustworthy to the people. The people were going to follow Moses, they had to trust him that he was reliable. And that's what emunah means, trust and reliability. The perfect example of this, by the way, a great example of this, is at Mount Sinai, is at the crossing of the sea, right? Look at source 3. This is the point at which they crossed the sea. God said to Moses, stretch out your hand, and he stretched out his hand, and the sea split, right? And what does the verse say just before they sing their song? It says, "Va'aminu b'Hashem u'Moshe avdo," and the people believed in God and Moses' servant. Why? Because the water split. Now, it doesn't mean they believed Moses existed. They'd seen Moses for years, right? Because they're believing in God and Moses. And if belief is an abstract psychological acceptance of a physical deity that you can't see, then you can't say he believed in Moses and God, right? Because I know God's there. If I tell you, do you believe in grey elephants? Well, yeah, because you've seen them. You know they exist. So you don't believe in it in the way you might believe in God. But if the verse puts the two together, it means that they're similar, and therefore it can't be about abstract belief, right? It's about trust. In other words, when the water split and Moses was there, they trusted in Moses to do what he said and keep going. And that's what it means. To believe is to trust him. I don't know if you know this. I don't know if you're fans, Americans, of the Eurovision Song Contest. I don't know if you're aware of it, which Israel goes in every year and actually does quite well. And so there was one year where there was an Israeli, I can't remember his name, David, anyway, his song was Ani Ma'amin, which means I believe. And it was it wasn't about God, it was about believing in people and this whole thing, I believe. And he didn't get through the initial rounds. Like he didn't get through the qualifying rounds. And I was in Israel at the time. And the front page of the newspaper the next morning was Hem lo heminu, which means people didn't believe because they didn't vote for him, right? And again, it was like they didn't buy his song, they didn't get into it, right? It's not they didn't believe he existed. So I hope you're getting the idea here. The word emunah doesn't mean abstract belief in a deity. It means trust that someone's going to come through, right? So if you have emunah in me, you believe I'm gonna be there for you. We'll do one more of these similar kind of examples, two more of these similar kind of examples, and we'll move on. This is unusual use now. Do you remember the story, right? This is after they got out of Egypt, after the splitting of the sea, before Mount Sinai. Remember the story of the Amalekites attacking? Remember that story? The Amalekite nation come and attack Israel, and the people they attack them from behind, and Moses lifts his hands up. And as long as Moses' hands up in the air, they're winning, and when the hands go down, they start losing. And so he gets tired, so two people help him. So look what the word says. And Moses' hands grew heavy, and they took a stone and put it beneath him, and he sat upon it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hand, one on each side. And it happened that his hands were reliable until the sun came down, which means his hands stayed up till the end, and therefore they won the battle. And look what the Hebrew says. By he yadav is yadayim, his hands, emunah. His hands were emunah. His hands were faithful or reliable until Ad Bo Hashem, until the sun went down. Can you see the use of the word emunah here? That's not the way you'd normally think emunah, but that emunah means reliability, trustworthiness. Can you see that? That's what the word really means. It's a totally different thing than abstract belief in God. I'm just looking at the comments of Jasper. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what you're trying to tell me, Jasper, but thank you for your comment. My spiritual facts are very rewarding. Good. Okay. Right. Let's keep going. Source 5. Another meaning is faithfulness. Right. This is God talking about Moses. My servant Moses is not like any other prophet. In all my house, he is faithful. Mouth to mouth do I speak to him. Ne'emanhu, which means Moses always sides with God. God's not saying I believe Moses existed. He's saying I trust him. So can you see? And by the way, this occurs the whole way through the Torah. In my book, I go through all the references. And consistently, we've misunderstood the word emunah, faith. Why do you think it means that you've got to believe that this superpower, superhero, pre-existing, all-powerful, unseeable thing exists? Where did that idea come from? It's not a Jewish idea. We've been influenced by the culture around us. That's not what belief means. And let me show you now, as I mentioned, this quote from Martin Buber, The Two Types of Faith, and see if you get what he's saying here. It's a little bit complicated. Hopefully you'll like it. And look, he's got a big beard, so he's probably onto something. He's trying to make you smile. Okay, here he goes. He says, remember, and Martin Buber wasn't Orthodox. He wasn't like particularly religious in that way. He was very culturally committed to the Jewish people, but in a very different way. But even he saw this. And I've just quoted, you can see from 4 pages in his book. It's a long book, but I've tried to kind of just go to the core of the argument. He says the following. There are 2, and in the end, only 2 types of faith. To be sure, there are very many contents of faith, what you believe, but we only know faith itself in 2 basic forms. Both can be understood from the simple data of our life. The one from the fact that I trust someone without being able to offer sufficient reason for my trust in him. The other from the fact that, likewise, without being able to give sufficient reason, I acknowledge a thing to be true. So faith either means I acknowledge a thing to be true or I trust someone. And then he says, in one, the man finds himself in the relationship of faith. In the other, he is converted to it. It's quite dramatic, the bits that I've chosen. What does that mean? So you either find yourself, that's going to be Judaism, or you're converted, that's going to be Christianity. Why? Look what he says. The man who finds himself in it is primarily the member of a community whose covenant with the unconditioned, that's God for him, includes and determines him within it. The man who is, right? So in other words, you just find yourself that you're in it. You wake up and you're born into the Jewish people. I'll go into more depth, but I'm explaining to you just what he means. Whereas the man who is converted to it is primarily an individual and one who has become an isolated individual, and the community arises as the joining together of converted individuals. So individual people believe something together to make a community, and that is going to be Christianity. I'll explain to you why as we go through it, but let me read more of it. He says the first of the 2 types of faith has its classic example in the period of Israel. That's us, the people of faith, a nation which took its birth as a community of faith. Right? We had a story with God. God took us out of Egypt before speaking to us at Sinai. God spoke to Abraham. We had a relationship with God. We were a community that knew God, and we were faithful to that. Right? That's what happened to us. The second, in the early period of Christianity, arose in the decay of ancient settled Israel. Christianity is very different, right? Jesus comes along and says, I'm the Son of God, and convinces people that that's the case. And people are converted individually to that belief. And then they start coming together. So Emunah originated in the actual experiences of Israel, but which were to experiences of faith. So we told ancient stories, how we were in a foreign land and we were persecuted and God saved us. That's our story. And from that story, we knew God because God looked after us. That's how we knew God. So therefore, emunah is the state of persevering, also to be called trust. We trusted in God. That's what we talk about from the past. Conversely, Christian, this is the Greek word pistis, that's faith in Greek, right? So faith is emunah in Hebrew and pistis in Greek. It could be Latin, actually, I'm not sure. Christian pistis was born in the soul of individuals. to whom the challenge came to believe that a man crucified in Jerusalem was their savior, and of the acceptance of the claim and of the confession made both in the soul and to the world, I believe that it is so. So when Christians said, I believe, what they were saying is, I believe that the physical man Jesus was also the Son of God, which is something something kind of, otherworldly, magical, as it were. Can you see? And therefore the word was used in different kinds of ways. Christianity meant to mean it as something extraordinary, miraculous, out of this world. Whereas to the Jewish people, it was just our history, how we looked at things. Now you might say, but Rabbi, believing that history to be true is also a kind of belief. But it wasn't like that. We just grew up with it. That was our story. Well, whether it's literal or mythological, that's what we understood. So I know lots of people who, as we said, came to synagogue after October the 7th. Do they believe in God? Are they sure there's a great, powerful thing in the sky? No. But they believe in the Jewish people. They believe in some kind of connection. That's emunah. Those people have emunah. They don't have pistis. So they count. Do you understand that? Very interesting approach. And I'll tell you more about it. But let me just look at your comments in the chat. There's a couple of comments in the chat. Judith, Christians translate amen to it is so. So it is so. Interesting, yeah. Yeah, I mean, amen, because in a blessing always feels a bit like I'm agreeing, but it's got a feeling of it is so, it's true. Whereas for us, it's like I commit to that. Although I think amen's got a colloquial meaning for both, maybe. And Mary says, how far apart is the Shema versus the doxology in Christianity? It was interesting. The idea of having a statement you have to make, a credo, a dogma, right, is actually not very Jewish, right? In fact, and I quote it in my book, there was a Jewish philosopher called and historian called Cecil Roth, and he said, the only dogma in Judaism is the dogmalessness of Judaism. Get that? The only dogma is that there's no dogma. You'll say, but Rabbi, what about the 13 principles of faith? And I'll say, what about the 13 principles of faith? Where are they from? You'll say, Maimonides. Well, how do you know them? In the Siddur, you'll find them twice. You'll find them at the end of Shacharit, the list of 13 principles. And also, anybody know, actually, anyone to type in, where else do you find the 13 principles of faith? It's in a song. Where else will you find in your Siddur the 13 principles of faith? Now, I like asking questions because then I can see if you're following. Here we go. What is good? Daniel's right. Yigdal, absolutely right. In the song Yigdal. Now, Maimonides didn't write either of those, even though he did the principles first. Right? Maimonides wrote those principles not as a separate book, not to be said as prayer. He would have been shocked that people prayed it. He was writing an introduction to one section of his commentary on the Mishnah in Sanhedrin. It was a commentary on the Mishnah. And in the introduction to the last chapter, he says, you can work out from the Mishnah what are the things that allow a Jew to be officially part of the Jewish people, to be accepted, to be part in a systematic way. And they're accepted if they believe these 13 principles. Now, you never get asked if you believe in them, but he was basically trying to do a borderline of what defines you as a citizen of Israel, that you commit to these 13 things. And so later on, other people said, oh, look, let's print those and sing them and talk about them. Why did people make such a big deal of what Maimonides did? Because they were living in Christian medieval Europe, where dogma and Christian beliefs were strong. And the Jews were like going, well, they've got their dogma, what's ours? But actually, we don't have dogma. People got upset with Maimonides for writing those things. And they said, we don't agree there's 13. And there's even a famous writer, Mark Shapiro. I don't know if you've ever had Mark teach for you. He's brilliant. Mark Shapiro's got a whole book on the 13 principles where he argues Maimonides himself didn't believe in a few of them, right? But he made them as a general statement. They're kind of like things you sign up for as a kind of a. So it's like I'm British, right? So I accept that King Charles is my king. Am I a royalist? I'm actually quite a royalist. I quite like it. But I know a lot of people who aren't royalists, but they're still British citizens. They just don't buy into the royal part of it. So being a citizen means part of the project of your country. Now, you might not agree with all the specifics, but you believe in the project. And it's the same with Judaism, right? Maimonides was saying you've got to believe in the project of Judaism. You've got to be part of the Jewish people. If you're not sure exactly what you believe, that's fine. right? Your emunah is your loyalty to the Jewish people. That's the cue. And the best example of this I know is the next source. Okay, now before I do this, who is the person from a Christian point of view, this, right? If we say that belief in God is knowing physically that there is a God, who in all human beings in human history knew God existed more than anybody else? So you might say Abraham, but I'd say Moses even more. Moses spoke to God face to face. If anyone knew God existed, it's Moses, right? Who is the one person in the Torah accused of not having emunah? Moses. Look at source 7, right? Again, we go back to that moment we're in the book of Numbers now. Remember when Moses hits the rock when he should have spoken to the rock? God says, take the staff and assemble the people to get water. The people are complaining. And Moses gathered them and he was upset. And he said, listen, you rebels, Moses says. Right? And Moses raised his hand and instead of talking, he struck the rock twice and water came out. And God said to Moses, because you are not loyal to me, to sanctify me before the Israelites, therefore you're not going to go to the land of Israel. But the Hebrew is, Ya'an lo ha'emantem bi. You didn't believe in me. What do you mean? Moses believed in God more than anybody. He knew God existed. From the Christian point of view, no one could have more of a knowledge of Moses. It's like if you've been to the moon, if you're Buzz Aldrin, you know about the moon. You've seen it with your own eyes. You and I have only seen videos. And if you've seen the movie Capricorn 1, you can mention that one, Ari, in your list of things. See the movie Capricorn 1. It's a great, great movie about faking a moon landing with Telly Savalas in it and Elliot Gould and a disgraced baseball player. Anyway, and so but the people that landed on the moon knew the moon to be physical even more than you and I. You and I know it's true because we trust, there's not a big lie. But if you actually been to the moon, you know more than anybody else. Well, Moses had seen God more than anybody else. And yet he's the one person that Torah says, God says, you didn't believe in me. So it can't mean that I existed. It means you weren't loyal to me, right? And actually, I'll show you the Talmud says this. Look at this. The Talmud says, Reish Lakish said, one who suspects the innocent is afflicted. If you doubt innocent people, you can get punished, he says. How do I know? Look at Moses. Moses says that Moses said to God, when I visit the Jewish people and tell them I'm from you, they won't believe in me. So Moses says to God, the Jewish people don't believe. So he accused the Jewish people of not being believers, right? Though it was revealed to God that Israel would believe. So this is a famous line, said God to Moses about the Jewish people. Hem ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. They are believers, the children of believers. But you one day won't believe. Now this phrase, ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim, I don't know if you know this, it's a song. We are believers, the children of believers. This idea is a Talmudic idea. Don't be rude about the Jewish people. I must tell you stories, by the way, that sometimes I would have doubts about the community in London. I'd go to Rabbi Sachs, my teacher, and I'd say, they're not going to do this, they don't care. And he'd say, Rafi, never give up on the Jewish people. They are ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. I was like, they don't really believe in God. He goes, that's not the point. They are ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim, right? What does that mean? They are part of the project. All of you are, right? You and out there in, computer land, I'm talking to now, different kinds of Jews, different denominations. Some of you think you don't believe, some of you do. The fact that you are here and learning Torah and a part of this is because you are ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. You are loyal to the cause. You are, you are deep down. That is what emunah means. It does not mean objective, abstract belief, as I keep telling you. It's very, very clear here, right? So I've got my summary. I'll quote from my book because it's the clearest summary of it. I worked really hard on this paragraph, so I'll read it out to you. This is what I want to say as summary. Reish Lakish's comment is the clearest expression as to the nature of emunah. No one could have believed in the truth of God's existence more than Moses. For no prophet again rose in Israel like Moses, who God knew face to face. And yet he's the very one castigated by God for his lack of emunah. This makes it abundantly clear that emunah, Jewish belief, is focused on trust. It means faithfulness more than it means faith. And now I summarize. This is a boon. This is a great thing for those who have difficulty with abstract belief, which I know a lot of Jews do. To have emunah is primarily to be trusting, committed, and faithful to the Jewish nation and their dedication to God. Trusting in the people with whom you share centuries of history, celebrating festivals and life cycle events, and caring for their welfare, committed to your own Jewish community, other communities around the world, and to Israel, the homeland of the Jewish people, and faithful to generations of Jews who, despite life's vicissitudes, have shared a common purpose, living meaningfully through their culture and traditions, knowing they could always rely on God. Consider that even after all his achievements, if Moses still lost the right to enter Israel because of momentarily losing faith in the Israelites, then surely it is being faithful to our fellow Jews that is of paramount importance. So the Talmud really nails it. It chooses to say that the person who failed in Emunah was Moses, not because he didn't believe in God, because he didn't believe in the Jewish people. And that's straight out the Talmud. Really interesting. It changes the whole thing. Emunah is about loyalty to the Jewish people. Now you'll say, but the Jewish people believe in God. Well, some of them do, some of them don't. But their leaders do, and that's part of it. Now I've got to tell you something. I'm still researching it now, but there's a whole other area that I've been fascinated by. I can see my camera's flashing. I've had an issue with my camera. I'm going to unplug it again, but I'm still here. There's no video for a second, don't worry. So this bit is really interesting. In fact, I'll unshare for a moment so I can talk to you directly. And it's really interesting. Actually, I'm just going to look before I do that. Let me look at the chat while I've got it there. So Mary says, so are you saying that Shema is more merely a statement of the unity of God as an affirmation and an affirmation of supremacy? Right? Yeah, when we talk about God, Mary, which is like a check-in, it's not about I believe God exists. I believe in the oneness of God. Right? The Lord our God is one. In other words, it's a unifying factor for the Jewish people, where it binds us all together. Right? The God's concept, whatever you think it is, binds us all together. Bernard, why is Aaron accused of not believing when it's only Moses who struck the rock? That's a longer story, Bernard. It's to do with him being punished for earlier issues and then coming out now. Again, it's a whole other class, but we can discuss it. Mary, so how do you differentiate this in Jews from Muslims, as Islam means submission? That's a great question. Let me talk about Arnold for a second and answer. Arnold says, the higher you fly, the harder you fall. Was Moses punished with severe because he was close to God? Could be, Arnold. It could be, but the punishment is nothing to do with abstract belief. That's what I've tried to show you. It's definitely about not believing in the Jewish people. But his punishment was stronger because he was a big leader. That's true. Mary, it's a complicated, going back to Mary's point about Islam, they submit to God and they make statements about the greatness and the power of God. Judaism focuses differently. Since you brought it up, I'll just mention it very, very briefly. There's a book by Robert Coles called The Spiritual Life of Children. And what Coles did in the, I think, 80s is he was a psychologist researcher. He interviewed young children from Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, just to see what they talked about and how they describe God. He's even got pictures of God and angels and everything. It's a great book. And the Christian section is called, it's called Christian Salvation, because the kids all talked about being saved by Jesus. And the Islamic chapter is called Islamic Surrender, because just as you said, they believe in submission and surrendering to God. Guess what the chapter on Judaism is called? Okay, it's right over there, so I'm going to get it. It's over here on my shelf. Let's hope I can find it quickly. Yes, here we go. So you'll see I'm not making it up. Anyone write in the chat? What do you think they describe? In other words, Cole wasn't a philosopher. He wasn't reading in. He was just responding to where the children called. Right, so I'll show it you now. Let's see what you've got. Bernard, the presentation, at least so far, very much like Reconstructionist. Oh, well, I'm Orthodox, but that's nice to hear. But the peoplehood is an important part, Bernard. There is an aspect of God, Bernard. The God idea matters, right? It's not just this, but this is part of it. So I've got two chapters in my book. One's about what does it mean to believe in God? What is the process of belief? And this chapter is about if you have difficulty with that concept, you're still counted as part of the Jewish people because you're faithful. And that's what Emunah means. But let me show you the chapter from the book. Here we go. Can you see it? Hold it up. I don't know if it's clear. I don't know if it's readable. Maybe not. I'll tell you. It says Christian salvation, Islamic surrender, and Jewish righteousness. The teenage kids talked about tzedakah and charity and doing good. That's what Jews understand. Looking after each other. Again, part of faith and loyalty. That's their understanding of it. So, I hope you've understood now clearly what Emunah means. And now I want to take it even further because there's other uses of the word emunah by the Torah and the rabbis, which adds to this point and makes it stronger and maybe makes it a bit less reconstructionist. Let's see. Here we go. Number 10. Emunah as the faith God has in us. Right? Rabbi Sachs used to say to me, he says, Rafi, God believes in you more than you believe in yourself. So you can do this. Look at this. It's a line in Deuteronomy. And you shall know the Lord your God is the faithful God, keeping the covenant. Hakel ha-ne'eman. God is a believer. Right? God is known as the faithful God. In the morning, the tradition, first thing you're supposed to say in the morning, again, you can do it how you like, but there's a lovely idea that this tradition that this is the first thing you say in the morning. Modeh or modah, depending male, female. Modah ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam. There's no mention of God's name there because you can say it before you cleaned up and washed your hands, you're in your pajamas or whatever, and you just go, thank you, God. By the way, you should say ani modeh, I'm thankful. But the first word you should say in the morning is not I, it's thank you. It's a very Jewish idea. Modah ani, thankful am I before you, God, right, living, established, sovereign, right, who returned my soul. Why? Because great is your faith in me. In other words, you bothered to keep me going again. You believed in me. That's the first thing you say in the morning. God, thank you for believing in me. And by the way, if you've ever achieved something in a group and you've led a team, afterwards you'll say, thank you for trusting me and letting me do this, right? Well, I can say to you, if this 1 hour, thank you for trusting me to take you on this journey. That's the first thing you say in the morning about God. So again, isn't that fascinating? God believes in us. It's about a relationship. That's what emunah is. What is your relationship with God? How do you understand it? That's what it's about. Yeah, lovely point, Mary. It fits in very well, absolutely. Okay, one more page. Now I've got time for comments as well. There is another part to emunah and the way the Torah uses it. There's one more aspect of it. We've talked about emunah meaning trust and loyal and faithful and even relationship, God believing in us. But there's one more moral aspect to emunah, which I'm going to get into now. I'm just keeping up with the comments. Now, Bernard, right? I'm going to answer Bernard. Right? Yes, Dennis, you're right. We're thankful to God. But Bernard's challenging me. He's got a good point. He goes, wait a second, Rabbi. If in the morning you say, living an established sovereign, then you're immediately accepting God exists. Well, yes, Bernard, you kind of are. But what is God for you? You're not saying what that is that you believe in. When someone comes to shul, Bernard, and they say, and you want to start praying, if you're Orthodox, you want 10 men, or progressive, you might have 10 people, a minyan, but you say you're Jewish, right? And then again, there's different definitions of Jewish, but we don't say, do you believe in God? We say you're Jewish. And if they say they are, then they count and you can pray together. Why is that, Bernard? Why don't we actually check that they believe in the right things? Because it's about being part of the people. And again, I don't check what you mean by, as I often tell teenagers, you can spell God with 2 O's. Do you believe in good? Do you really believe that good exists? And if you do, then maybe you believe in God. And there's even, if you look at Friday night davening, the name for God is good, and the opposite of God is Ra. If you look at a Friday night, you'll see that in the davening. It's very clear for the rabbis, good and God are the same thing, and rejection of God and evil are the same thing. So that's my answer to Bernard. Okay. Judith is asking about observing mitzvot. Absolutely, Judith. Why do you observe mitzvot? Because you're part of the system. You're part of the project of the Jewish people. Right? Now, I believe that those mitzvot came from God at Mount Sinai in some direct way, and progressive Jews believe that it was maybe more influenced by human beings and came down more through human minds, much more than just from God. Okay? The classic explanation of this, by the way, I'm sure you all know very briefly, is it's what by Louis Jacobs said. You know what? What's the bracha for bread? Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, who brought bread out of the ground. You say, blessed are you, God, King of the universe. You all say this Friday night. Blessed are you, King of the universe, who brings bread out of the ground. God does not bring bread out of the ground. Right? Right? Wheat. If God does anything, God grows the wheat. You then cut the wheat and clean it and then make bread. So Rabbi Louis Jacobs used to say, Hamotzi lechem min haaretz is the same as Torah min hashamayim, Torah from heaven. It doesn't just fall from heaven. You've got to bake it. You've got to cook it. You've got to deal with it and bake something and make it grow. And then you've got it. So that min, he says, is similar. So again, we have different points of view of what we mean by God and what we mean by mitzvot and what we mean by a commandedness, right, Judith? But even so, it's all interrelated. Now, Margaret's looking up the origins of the word belief. Absolutely. Trust, good, very good. You start looking at the English meaning of the word, belief and faith all gets quite complicated as well. You're absolutely right. This idea of an abstract belief is a very modern idea, right? You know what? I summarize it in a very nice way in my book. I say, for Judaism, emunah is much more about affiliation than affirmation, right? It's affiliation, not affirmation. The idea of affirming of a statement of reality is a Christian, non-Jewish, and in some ways quite a modern idea. But to affiliate to something is what we Jews do. You're part of the group. And everything about Judaism tells you that, about community and joining in. Every mitzvah, you know it's about community. You feel it in your bones about how we keep it. You're brought up to be part of community and do things together. So that's what emunah is. Emunah is held in the Jewish people. But there's one more aspect to it I wanted to mention, which is integrity. What do I mean? Right? When you die, please God, 120. Right? By the way, you know the joke? What do you say to someone on the 120th birthday? Have a great day. Right. So you should die at 120. And the Talmud says when you die and you go to heaven, you're going to get asked 6 questions by God, right? Or the angelic host, whatever it is, when you're brought to judgment. These are the following. Did you conduct business with integrity? Did you find time to learn Torah? Did you try and have children or the equivalent? Did you look for salvation, right? Did you engage in wisdom? Did you understand things? Notice, it doesn't mention kashrus or Shabbos, by the way. But look at the first one. Did you conduct your business, anything financial, whether you had a business or you paid your fees or your bills on time? That's the first question you get asked. Not the last, the first. In Hebrew, nasata v'natata be'emunah. Were you faithful in the way you did your business? Emunah here is applied to good business deals, to being ethical in the way you treat people. Look at that. That's what emunah is. You paid your staff on time. You paid your bills on time. You didn't underpay, right? The Talmud even gets into it for the destruction of the temple. And Rava said Jerusalem was only destroyed when there were no people of faith left. And Shei Amanah. As it says in Jeremiah, when he's talking about the destruction of the first temple, search the streets of Jerusalem, see now and know, seek through her boulevards. If you can find one who acts justly, who asks for integrity, mevakesh emunah, I will forgive her. Jeremiah says, look, if I could find anyone who's got integrity anymore, I won't destroy Jerusalem. And then the Talmud says, is that so? Rav Katanya say, even in the breakdown of Jerusalem, there were always people of faith within her. But what do you mean there were religious people? There were rabbis walking, not rabbis, it was 6th century, but there were religious people. People believed in God. What do you mean they didn't have a emunah? So he goes, no, this is not a clash. This refers to matters of Torah, but Rava meant business integrity. Right? So emunah can mean learning Torah and believing in God and all that stuff, or it can mean treating people fairly. And I mean, when Jeremiah says they lacked emunah, it doesn't mean the emunah that you think it means. It means emunah of being ethical. That's the challenge. So emunah, if someone, so I'll tell you a story. There's the great way of saying it. My mother used to say, why is it, right? You'll have a big picture of in the Jewish newspaper, say a guy with a big beard, and a rabbi who's fiddled his taxes. You know, he makes it to the paper, and they'll go, ultra-Orthodox Jew doesn't pay their taxes. And she goes, what do you mean ultra-Orthodox? He fiddled his taxes. He's not a believer, right? Whereas you'll have a picture of a secular Jew who, say, gives £1 million to a Jewish charity, and they'll say, secular atheist gives $1 million to a Jewish charity. And they'll go, what do you mean? He's got emunah. He's got loyalty to the Jewish people. He's giving. You know, we've confused ourselves of who's religious and who's not religious. When I stand before a person who really gives to the Jewish people, who fights in the Israeli army, they've got emunah. They literally have from the Talmud. Of course, you're supposed to believe in God. Of course, you're supposed to work on what it means to understand the nature of what God is, right? And I've got a whole chapter on that in my book. But even if you have difficulty with that, you are still part of the Jewish people. And you know, I told you about the 13 principles of faith of Maimonides, but actually the Talmud at the end of Makot discusses how many beliefs should a person have, or what's the most important belief that a person. I might unplug it again. What's the most important belief? What's the most important verses believe? And they debate it. And some say there are 10 ideas you have to believe, and some say there are 5 ideas, and some say there are 3. And it's all in the end of Talmud Makot, if you're interested. It's in 24a or 23b, 24a, around there. And there's a big discussion about what you have to believe. And they get down finally to one verse and say, as long as you have this verse, you're okay. And what's the verse? It's from Habakkuk. But tzaddik be'emunato yichiyeh. But a righteous person, by their integrity, they shall live. If you have integrity, right, then you're a good Jew. It's the most fundamental thing. I have to tell you, by the way, do you know the word for being religious in Yiddish? It's like fum. It's the fum yid. So you would say in modern times, you say, it's the fum yid, which means is he fum? Is he religious? But you know, if you go back 50, 60 years ago, people didn't used to ask that. They used to ask, is the ehrliche yid? Is the ehrliche yid? You know what ehrliche means? Ehrliche is straight. Are they a Jew of integrity? That was the measure. It used to be not how much you keep, but how moral and ethical are you. It was assumed you kept the mitzvot. It was assumed you kept Shabbat. Of course you did those things, but why? To focus on becoming an ethical person. Right? And it helps you, by the way. Mitzvot help you. I personally believe that 100%. But if you're forced every day to give charity because you're doing it and you pray every day, it makes you God conscious, you become more caring, it works. But some people abuse it. They keep all these laws and they don't become more ethical. Right? They learn Torah every day, they pray to God every day, and yet they've got no emunah. Can you believe that? They've got no emunah. Before I end this, I'll tell you a little story about that, which is it's what the Hasidim argued about against the Mitnagdim, right? So famously, the Baal Shem Tov would walk into a synagogue and he'd look around and then he'd go and pray outside. And they'd say, why are you praying outside? And he says, well, I walked in the synagogue and the egos of the people are so big, are so large, they fill the whole synagogue and there's no room for God. So God's outside. So I figured if I want to pray to God, I've got to go outside. Guess what? They didn't invite him back. But he made the point, right? About making space for God. And these mitzvot help us do that. But that's what emunah is really about. So I know I'm confusing some of you because saying, well, do you have to believe or don't you? Does it matter or doesn't? Of course it matters. You've got to work on that. But if you're not sure, it's forgivable. If you're part of the project and you're trying to understand what it means and you're open to it, you're okay. The only way you're out of the game is if you reject the Jewish, if you talk badly against them, if you get up publicly and say all the rabbis of every denomination are talking rubbish and I reject them all. If you privately think that or you're not sure, that's fine. The only way you're in massive trouble is if you publicly reject and jump away. And if you don't do that, then it's fine. I like your point. No finger on the scale. As a butcher, you're weighing up the meat. It's a very good point. It's so easy to cheat in business. It's so easy to get away with it in certain things. And that's the measure of a Jew at that moment, when you choose to pay on time. You know, or when someone gives you change and you realize they've given you too much change, you go, no, I think you gave me too much change. That is an act of emunah, when you give the money back and say, no, it's not that. Or you make sure people get paid on time. All those things. That's the heart of it. Doesn't mean that God isn't important. God's part of it as well. Okay? But you still count. I'm going to give you one more example, and then we'll look at the end of the text. Here's what I realized. Now, this might seem weird. Again, my camera's playing. I'm going to plug it again. But this is a really important idea now. And so I do, but this is really important. I want to talk about ultra-Orthodox Jews for a moment. Because there's a lot of them in Israel and in America, right? Hundreds of thousands of ultra-Orthodox communities. I don't know what you think of them, but I realized something. There must be a lot of people there who aren't sure about God, right? See, if you're in the progressive world, or even the modern Orthodox world like me, if you stop believing, you walk away, right? You say, I'm not so sure, you get less religious, you marry out, you say whatever. Ultra-Orthodox Jews stay, right? They have to stay often because they're already married, because they're scared, they want their family. So they stay, but they're not sure they believe. And they go to their rabbis and they say, Rabbi, like black cat, I'm not sure I believe. You know how I know this? Because I started looking at the responsa in the ultra-Orthodox world of the rabbis about faith. Right? I didn't look at the progressive or modern Orthodox. I looked at the ultra-Orthodox in Yiddish, in Hebrew. And when you read that, they are so open about it. You know why? Because they deal with it the whole time. Because there must be thousands of people who stay part of the Haredi world. You might be upset about that they can't leave because they're, socially controlled. But whatever it is, at the end of the day, there's a lot of people who are there who clearly don't believe. And the rabbis say to them, right? And there's a famous article, Kovetz Mamarim, by Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman, a very famous ultra-Orthodox rabbi, and he talked about why are people atheists? He says it can't be that belief in God has to be a very complicated idea that only the greatest philosophers can do, because a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old or 12-year-old Jew is commanded the mitzvah to believe in God. So I can't command you something that's not possible, right? Like I can't command you to fly. So if I command you to believe, it must be possible. And therefore, once you start reading what he says about Emunah, and it's couched very carefully, I'm still reading through it, but if you read it carefully, he is much nearer to the faithfulness aspect I'm talking about than that you have to accept that there is a being that did these miracles. Right? He says things like you have to believe that the Jewish people got saved and that God is there for us, but in a much more general sense, not about this objective proof of God's existence. He's not interested in it. And it makes so much sense because where do you have the most people who are challenging, asking questions about faith? Not in the progressive world, not in the modern Orthodox world. They just walk away. Although some ask, they read my book. That's why I wrote it. There are some. But where are there thousands of them? In the ultra-Orthodox world, because they can't leave. And they talk to their rabbis, and rabbis go, well, look, it's about Jewish people, and they talk in this way. So it's unusual, but actually they say the same thing. Anyway, I've got a few minutes. Let me just look at one more source and then we'll end. Share, and then I'll answer some of the questions as well. Here we go. One more thing I want to show you. Yeah, this is from Mary Douglas, a brilliant. I have a problem as an Orthodox rabbi. I don't quote enough women. My wife always tells me off. So anytime I can, I do. Mary Midgley, right, was an amazing philosopher, brilliant woman, right? Right, I heard her speak once. Really, really smart, brilliant. And she wrote a book called Evolution as a Religion. It's a real dig at the new atheists, saying that the way new atheists talk about atheism is religious, right? If you followed that. And she makes this amazing quote. She says, a faith is not primarily a factual belief, the acceptance of a few extra propositions like God exists or there'll be a revolution. Rather, faith is the sense of having one's place within a greater whole than oneself, one whose larger aims so enclose one's own and give them point that sacrifice for it may be entirely proper. Right? It's so meaningful to you that you're willing to sacrifice for it. And that's what Israeli soldiers and people in Israel are doing today. Okay? Are they sure they believe in God? But they're putting their lives on the line for the Jewish people. They could walk away. They could leave. Why are they doing this? Okay, you might say, well, they're Israelis. It's their country. But they know it's a Jewish country. They know it's about that. They sing Jewish songs, but they're willing to put their life on the line. And May Midgley is absolutely right that they would do that. Okay. So that's the point I wanted to make. I've got a summary over here, but you can read it in your own time. But it's what I said. In summation, and we're now focused on affiliation rather than affirmation, belonging more than believing. That's what it is. It binds Jewish people to each other rather than to a catechism. A catechism is a Christian idea of a dogma, whereas for us, we're bind to each other. That's what the word emunah means. Is that enough? Does God not matter? No, God matters. Belief in that sense matters. But if you have emunah, it's enough and you're part. There we go. Okay, now let's look at some comments and then I'll hand over to Ari. Jasper says, if a child is smart enough to ask a question, they are able to understand the answer. If given in ways they can understand. That's true. So you educate someone. Many Jews consider Adonai as a failure for not giving every human spirituality. Not sure what you mean by that, Jasper, but it's definitely a process. In the earlier chapter in my book, chapter 9, where I talk about faith, I say that faith is a quest. It's a journey that you go on, right? And you can only understand it if you start the journey. And you'll be surprised how far you can get. Okay? And that's part of our belief as well. Shall I upset you a bit for the last minute or two with questions? Can I make one more comment, Ari?
Yeah, and we have a question and two more questions to ask as well. So go ahead.
No, you ask the questions first, then
Okay. So one
I'll
question was in when you quoted Martin Buber, and he talks about two kinds of faith.
yeah.
And so where do Jews by choice fit then in choosing to become Jewish?
Brilliant, brilliant question. You know why? When you convert, you look in the Talmud, what it says. The Talmud doesn't say, do you accept every mitzvah? You're going to keep every mitzvah. No, Talmud says, tell them about a few of the mitzvot and then say the following to them, right? Don't you realize the Jewish people are hated and challenged by the world? Do you still want to be part of us? And if they say yes, you accept them. That's the heart of conversion. Peoplehood, not belief. Look it up. It's in the Talmud. The most amazing thing, right? Because even in conversion, the most important thing is do you buy into being part of it? So yes, in that sense, you are converting, but you're not converting to a belief. You're converting to a people. You're joining us. You're joining us. And that's the point. I hope that
Thank you.
answers the question. Again, it's in
Thank
the
you.
book as well, that issue.
Yes. And then, I mean, if there's something you want to add on to the subject, that's great. The next question really is, first of all, thank you for the terrific series. And I'm getting lots of nice emails. People have enjoyed it, and today's class was fantastic. The question was, which questions did you leave out of your book and why? And is there going to be like a part two where you address
So
more
the two big
questions?
ones were about feminism and homosexuality. Well, that's that question I said, why does the Torah privilege heterosexual men? It's a problem that everyone's got to deal with, right? Whether you're Orthodox or progressive, right? Torah's written for men. At Mount Sinai, God says, get ready for 3 days. Don't go near women. It's talking to men. Okay, so why is that? And feminism and that kind of stuff. And the other big one is about revelation at Mount Sinai. Right? Did the revelation at Mount Sinai happen? And I figured it was much better to deal with that question is much better to deal with it by looking at other stories like the flood, which is what I did. Sometimes answering those questions isn't so helpful. It's like trying to look at the sun. Also, and maybe I'm being facetious now, but I think everybody believes that the Torah is from God, Ari. You know why I think that? I think I mentioned this before, because I've been to Reform synagogues and they've got an ark. And Shabbos morning, Ari, in your synagogue, you take the Torah out and you kiss it. And you've got a scroll and you read it. And when rabbis quote, they quote from the Torah. And if people really believed that it was just a book written by people like everything else, they wouldn't do that. So I don't care what the denominations officially say. I just look at what people do. And every synagogue I've ever been to, everyone there believes that that book is holy and is from God in some sense. And that for me is a belief in revelation. So why do I have to prove revelation when everybody believes it anyway? That's how I look at it. I don't know if that makes sense, but I really think in
Oh, it
those
would have
ways.
been a short chapter.
Fun?
It's a
Yeah,
short chapter then.
it would have been a short chapter. It would have been.
A
It would have been.
pamphlet.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Anyway, those are the two questions that I
Are there more, or shall I make my final comment?
wrap it up.
Wrap it up. Okay, so we did 4 different kinds of questions about creation, about retaliation. So creation was a kind of origin issue about science and religion. Retaliation about King David was a moral issue. Chosenness was a kind of historical issue. And faith and belief was a religious issue. And I was trying to show you that the book responds to all different kinds of questions. And here's the thing, you're not there yet. This journey I mentioned, you're still on. If you're alive, you're still on. And let me tell you an example of this. If I told the average 5-year-old boy in about 10 years, chances are you're going to really like girls. You know what that boy will tell me at 5? He'll go, girls, ugh. And I say, no, you'll think about them day and night. You'll dream, you'll be obsessed. Not necessarily. Some people are gay or trans, whatever it is, but most of you will want that. And he goes, I can't believe it. And yet 10 years later, he does, but he couldn't imagine it. And the other things, 10 years later in your life, things you couldn't imagine you're suddenly doing. So here's my question to you, Marion, Judith, Richard, Jake, Barry, all of you. Right? However old you are, do you believe that certain things that you can't imagine you would do or believe today could be true in 10 years' time? Because if you don't, then you're just as naive as that 5-year-old kid, right? There are higher levels of knowledge and consciousness and relationship that we can all achieve as long as there's breath in our body. And if you go to CSP, it'll help you get there because of the great range of courses. But there's more growth to do. The quest for God only ends at your shiva. Until then, you're on the journey, and be open to that possibility. Please don't become closed. That's what happens to us. I'm 56 and I get closed the whole time. And to try and keep the door open, to really believe there's more that I can learn, even though I'm a rabbi, that's the challenge. To feel young and open to new ideas and growth. That's the challenge of belief in God for me. It's an ongoing quest that we spend our lives doing. So I'll see you on the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the series. I will say a funny story. We had my son's birthday party on Sunday, and he had boys and girls from the class, and it was like we had a mechitza. The boys were on one side, the girls on the other.
Ooh,
So I liked your example and your teaching today.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Take
And
care.
I see Bernard said that his humanistic rabbi said that they believe Torah is just another book. And my response is, I don't care what they say. I just care what do they do on Shabbos with the Torah. If they have a Sefer Torah, that's good enough for me. That means that they believe in something. So I don't look at what people say. Look at what people do. You ever seen the film My Fair Lady? Right, when she sings to Freddie, says, "Stop telling me you love me. Show me." It's a great song called "Show Me," and I believe in that. Don't don't say don't. People say I care. What do they do? Do they turn up? Do they commit? If they commit, they're real. That's the challenge. So yes, if you could find the clip of Show Me singing to Freddie in My Fair Lady, that's a great clip, Ari. That's a good way to end.
Okay. Well, we'll have lots of follow-up, and urge you all to support CSP, to
Cool.
support London School of Jewish Studies, support Jewish education at your synagogues, in your community, at the JCCs, wherever you learn. And I'll send you stuff about this class on Devarim, Deuteronomy, with Rabbi Zarum. Take care. Have a terrific, I can't believe it's a Tuesday, but it's a Tuesday. We'll see you in Bulgaria and Greece on Thursday. And
And I'll see you in Sinai next week. I'll see you at Sinai.
oh, we have a
Is there going to
special
be a CSP
CSP thing.
section, Ari, at Sinai?
Yeah, yeah. We look for the banner. We do have a special
I'll look for the banner.
CSP Shavuot email coming out on Thursday, so look for that and the handout that we have there. So
I'll be in the Royal British section, so come visit.
and yeah, I think we have to get dressed up for that. It's very formal. Will you have tea? Is that how it
We will
works?
have tea. We'll all be wearing ties.
And crumpets. Okay. So and Rabbi Zarum, we look forward to having you back in our 25th year. Send me some topics. Okay.
Amen.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Lots of clapping. Yay. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody. Ahuva, good to see you. Bye.